Some people only see when the world forces them to look. My uncle made a toast at my cousin's wedding. He raised his glass, looked around the table at every face he considered worth acknowledging, and said, "To the ones who built something real, to the men in this family who know how a dollar works." I was sitting 3 feet away from him. He didn't look at me once. I smiled. I sipped my water, and I thought about the wire transfer I'd approved that morning. 7 figures, moving quietly through an account that had my initials on it and nobody else's name. That was 2 years ago. A lot has changed since then. Or maybe nothing has. Maybe the only thing that changed was me, the part of me that used to need him to look. It started the way most things in my family started, at a table, with food nobody was really tasting, and conversation that was really just people auditioning for each other. My uncle's 60th birthday. My aunt had rented out a private room at a steakhouse in Phoenix, the kind of place with dark wood paneling and leather menus and servers who refill your water glass before you even notice it's low. Everyone was dressed up. My cousin Trevor had flown in from Chicago, still wearing his airport blazer, already holding a bourbon. My cousin Melissa was there with her husband, who worked in commercial real estate and spoke exclusively in percentages. And then there was me, Catherine, Kate, back from Seattle for the weekend, wearing a blazer I'd owned since graduate school and trying to remember why I'd agreed to come. My uncle held court the way he always did. He had a voice built for rooms, loud without being angry, certain of itself the way only men who've never been seriously questioned can be. He'd spent 30 years in financial consulting. He had opinions about everything, the market, the government, his golf handicap, and he shared all of them with the confidence of someone who had never once been wrong, or at least had never noticed when he was. The problem with young people today, he said, cutting into his steak, is they want the shortcut, they want the app, they want the algorithm. He gestured toward Trevor, who nodded. Real wealth is built the old way, relationships, discipline. You put in the time, you earn the trust, and the money follows. Melissa's husband nodded like this was scripture. I kept my eyes on my plate. Kate, my uncle said, turning to me finally. He always said my name like it was a consolation prize. You still doing that? What was it? Data analytics thing? Something might bat, I said. He chuckled. Well, hopefully you're building towards something with a real ceiling. A woman your age needs to be thinking about stability, not just a paycheck, but a foundation, preferably with someone who understands how money actually works. Trevor laughed. Not unkindly, just reflexively, the way men do when other men say something they recognize. Melissa looked at her wine glass. My aunt patted my hand. He just wants what's best for you, honey. I nodded. I said, of course. I excused myself to use the restroom and stood in front of the mirror for a long moment, hands flat on the sink, looking at my own face. I'd closed a Series B round the week before. $14 million. My startup, a B2B software company I'd built from a spare bedroom in my Seattle apartment, had just been valued at $68 million. Nobody at that table knew. I hadn't told them. And standing there in the bathroom of a steakhouse in Phoenix, listening to my uncle's voice carry through the walls, I made a decision I didn't quite realize I was making. I would keep not telling them. For a while, longer, because there was something building, something that hadn't finished building yet, and I wanted to see what it looked like when it was done. I should tell you where I came from first because it matters. My dad left when I was 9. Not dramatically, no screaming, no one night with a suitcase on the porch. He just sort of receded. Like a tide going out so slowly you don't notice until the beach is completely dry. By the time I was 12, he was calling on birthdays and holidays, and sometimes, not even then. My mum worked 2 jobs for most of my teenage years, office administrator during the day, bookkeeper for a restaurant 3 nights a week. She was quiet about it, not bitter, just practical. She had no patience for self-pity in herself or anyone else. My uncle, her older brother, had always considered himself the patriarch of what remained of the family. He'd done well, objectively. He'd built his consulting practice into something real, put his kids through college without loans, bought a house in Scottsdale with a pool. He was generous in the way that men who need to feel generous often are. He paid for dinners, he gave advice freely, he told you what you should be doing and framed it as a gift. He never quite forgave my mother for not needing him more. And he never quite forgave me for being her daughter. Quiet, self-contained, building things he couldn't evaluate or take credit for. I graduated from Arizona State on a merit scholarship. I worked 3 years at a tech company in Tempe, learning everything I could about enterprise software and pretending to learn nothing at all. I saved aggressively, lived carefully, and in the evenings I built the first version of what would become my company. The idea was simple: a workflow automation platform for small and mid-sized accounting firms, the kind of firms that still use spreadsheets for things that could take 30 seconds with the right tool. I understood the problem because my mother had lived it, hours of manual reconciliation work, late into the night, for clients who paid her less than she deserved. I moved to Seattle because the investor ecosystem was stronger, and I needed to be somewhere my family wasn't watching. Not out of shame, I want to be clear about that. Out of something harder to name. If I failed, I wanted to fail privately, and if I succeeded, I wanted it to be mine before anyone else had a chance to weigh in on whether it counted. My first partner was a woman named Vivian, not Vivian, with an A, who I'd met at a conference in Portland. She was sharp, skeptical of everything, and had a talent for finding the exact flaw in any plan within about 45 seconds of hearing it. We complemented each other well. She pushed back on everything I brought her, and I pushed back on everything she pushed back on, and somewhere in the friction of that, we built something that actually held up. We closed our seed round 18 months after founding, $2.4 million, from a Portland-based fund whose lead partner had once worked in financial services and immediately understood what we were building. Within a year, we had 43 clients. Within 2 years, over 200. The Series B happened fast, faster than I'd planned, because a competitor came to market and created urgency we hadn't anticipated. $14 million. Valuation of $68 million. My name on documents that made my hand shake when I signed them. Not from fear, from something closer to recognition. Like meeting yourself somewhere you didn't expect. I flew home to Phoenix for my uncle's birthday 3 days later. The months after the Series B were the most demanding of my life, in a way that's hard to explain to people who haven't done it. Money doesn't make things easier, it makes them louder. Suddenly there were investors with opinions and timelines, board members with agendas, journalists who'd found our press release and wanted quotes I didn't know how to give without sounding like someone I didn't want to become. Vivian handled most of the external communications. I stayed in the product. I knew that was where I needed to be, not in front of cameras, not at conferences, not doing the performance of success that a lot of founders get addicted to. I was building something. I needed to stay inside it. My uncle called me once during this period. He'd heard something, vaguely. Someone had mentioned my company's name in conversation, some mutual acquaintance who worked in tech. "Kate," he said, "I heard you're doing some kind of software thing. Is it going anywhere?" "It's going," I said. "Good. Just make sure you're building towards something with legs. A lot of these tech companies look good on paper and then..." He made a sound. "Implosion," I assumed. "Just be careful with other people's money. That's not nothing." "I know," I said. "You need anything? Introductions? I know some people in the investment community here." "I'm okay," I said. "But thank you." There was a pause. He wasn't used to being turned down even graciously. "Well, let me know." I thanked him again and we hung up. I sat for a moment with my phone in my hand. Then I went back to work. The call I didn't expect came on a Tuesday morning in October. Vivian walked into my office with her laptop open and her expression very still, which was how I knew something significant had happened. Vivian had 2 modes. Animated when things were normal, and very, very still when things were not. "You need to see this," she said and turned the screen toward me. It was an email from the business development director of a firm called Hartley Financial Consulting Group. They were interested in licensing our platform for use across their client portfolio, approximately 300 small and mid-sized accounting firms they service nationally. They were looking for a scalable solution. They'd found us through an industry publication. They wanted to set up a discovery call. The name, Hartley. I looked at Vivian. She raised an eyebrow. Hartley Financial Consulting Group was my uncle's firm. He'd rebranded it 4 years ago when he brought on 2 partners. I'd seen the announcement on LinkedIn and scrolled past it. The name change had made me feel vaguely distant from something I hadn't realized I was attached to. Now, here it was, landing in my inbox, asking for a meeting. He didn't know. The email was addressed to our company, not to me. His business development director had found us through a trade publication. To him, we were just a promising platform he was evaluating. I closed the laptop gently. "Do you want me to respond?" Vivian asked. "Yes," I said. "Set up the call. Standard process. Don't mention my last name." She nodded slowly. "You sure?" "Very," I said. The discovery call happened 2 weeks later. His business development director, a man named Stuart, efficient and businesslike, ran through their needs. 300 client firms, variable software infrastructure, need for standardized workflow, timeline of approximately 6 months for initial rollout. He didn't mention my uncle by name. My uncle didn't appear on the call, but I knew his firm's numbers by now. I'd requested their public financials as part of our standard due diligence. They were strong enough that I could see what licensing our platform would mean for their efficiency. I could also see the pressure points. A major competitor had entered their market in the Southwest. Client retention was down 4% from the previous year. They needed this more than the email had let on. We sent a proposal 2 days later. Competitive pricing, structured rollout plan, dedicated onboarding support. Stuart emailed back within an hour. They were interested in moving forward. The contract negotiation took 3 weeks. My name appeared on every document. My title, co-founder and CEO. I signed the final version on a Wednesday. I sent a brief note to Stuart expressing how much we looked forward to working with Hartley Financial. Then I set my phone face down on my desk and sat in the quiet of my office for a long time. Somewhere in Phoenix, my uncle had just entered into a major software contract with his niece's company. He had no idea. His firm would save an estimated 400 hours of manual work per month across their client portfolio. His efficiency metrics would improve. His clients would be happier. He would tell people he'd found the right tool at the right moment. He still didn't know it was me. I flew home for Thanksgiving. My mother made her turkey the way she always did. Brined overnight, roasted slow, the kitchen smelling like thyme and butter by 8 in the morning. My aunt and uncle came with Trevor and his girlfriend. Melissa and her husband drove up from Tempe. It was a normal Thanksgiving, which meant it was mostly fine, occasionally warm and punctuated by moments that reminded you why geography between family members is sometimes a gift rather than a loss. My uncle was in a good mood. The software rollout at his firm was going well. Stuart had apparently given him a briefing, and he was enthusiastic about the efficiency gains. He mentioned it at dinner, turning to Trevor and his girlfriend as he served himself stuffing. "We just brought on this new platform," he said. "Workflow automation for our accounting clients. Tremendous. I don't know why we didn't do it sooner. These young people, they know how to build the right tools. Smart company out of Seattle." He shook his head, impressed with himself for making a smart technology decision. This is how you stay competitive. You find the best tools. You don't get sentimental about the old way. Melissa looked at me briefly. She knew. I told her 3 weeks ago, quietly, in a text message that said only, "The firm your dad just licensed software from is mine. Please don't say anything yet." She'd responded, "I'm sorry, what?" And then, an hour later, "Okay." I watched my uncle describe my company's features to his son-in-law. I watched him explain our value proposition. I kept eating. I asked my mother if she needed help with the cranberry sauce. After dinner, when my aunt and uncle were in the living room and Trevor and his girlfriend had stepped outside, Melissa found me in the kitchen drying dishes. "Are you going to say something?" she said very quietly. "Not tonight," I said. "Kate." "I know. He literally just, I know." I handed her a dry plate. "I want to be sure about something first." She took the plate and looked at me with an expression I recognized from childhood, half exasperated, half something that might have been pride. "You're the most patient person I've ever met," she said. "And I mean that as a mild criticism." I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed all day. What I was waiting to be sure about was this. I wanted to know if he would figure it out on his own. The contract had my name on it, my title, my company's name, which if he'd ever taken 20 minutes to look up his niece's career, he would have recognized. I'd been building this for 6 years. There had been a TechCrunch article after the Series B that mentioned me by name. There had been a profile in a Seattle business journal. There had been, if you looked, a trail. He hadn't looked. He'd let Stuart handle it. He hadn't Googled the CEO of the company he'd just signed a 6-figure contract with. I understood it without needing it to hurt me. He had never considered me worth paying attention to. I was a quiet girl who grew into a quiet woman. No splashy announcements, no dramatic life events for the family to gather around. I didn't call often enough. I lived far away by choice. In his mental ledger, I was simply not a category he checked. This is not a story about a villain. I want to be careful about that. My uncle is not a monster. He is a man who built a certain kind of life and came to believe that this life was the only valid template. He patronized me because he couldn't imagine another metric. He dismissed my work because it lived outside his understanding. These things are small cruelties, not large ones. But small cruelties repeated over years accumulate into something that takes up space. What I was waiting for was not revenge. I'm not sure revenge was ever quite the right word for what I wanted. What I wanted was legibility. I wanted to be seen on terms I'd set, not his. I got my answer in February. Stuart emailed Vivian to schedule an expansion conversation. The initial rollout had exceeded their efficiency projections. They wanted to discuss scaling 2 additional client segments, potentially doubling the contract value. Stuart mentioned that this time the firm's founder would like to join the call personally. My uncle was going to be on the call. I sat with this information for 2 days. Then I called Melissa. "He's going to see my name on the screen," I said. "On the meeting invite. On the contract he'll review beforehand." "Yes," she said, "so it's not going to be a dramatic reveal. He'll figure it out before the call starts." "Probably," she said. "Good," I said, and I meant it. I didn't want theatre. I just wanted the facts to be the facts. The meeting was a Thursday at 2 o'clock Pacific. I dialed in from my office. Vivian was beside me. 2 of our implementation specialists were on the call. Stuart was there, along with 2 other people from Hartley's operations team, and then my uncle joined. There was a pause of perhaps 3 seconds after his video came on. I could see him reading the participant names. I watched his face, the small stillness that moved across it, the adjustment, the recalibration happening behind his eyes. "Kate," he said. "Hi," I said. Another pause. "This is you built this." "Vivian and I built this," I said. "We started it about 6 years ago. I moved to Seattle when we incorporated." He was quiet for a moment. The others on the call were watching their screens with the careful neutrality of people who have walked into a room mid-conversation and are deciding how much to acknowledge. "I didn't know," he said. "I know you didn't," I said. "We can catch up after the call. Right now I'd like to talk about your expansion goals." He nodded once. And we had the meeting. We talked for an hour. It was professional and productive. His operations team was thorough. The expansion would take them to 800 client firms across 4 regions. The contract value would be substantial. By the end of the call, we'd agreed on a timeline and a next step. After Stuart and the others dropped off, it was just my uncle's video feed. "Kate," he said again, like he was still learning something. "I should have told you sooner," I said. "I wasn't hiding it on purpose. I needed to build it first, before anyone had opinions about it." He was quiet. He looked older in the small rectangle of his camera than he did in person. "I didn't even look," he said. "I let Stuart run the whole thing, and I didn't look at who I was signing with." "It's okay. It's not." He rubbed the side of his face. "I've been running my mouth about that software at every dinner for 3 months. I told your mother it was a smart find. I told your cousin. Kate, I had no idea. I know, I said. I said some things. Over the years. He said it simply. Not an apology, not quite. More like an observation made by someone finally looking at data they'd been avoiding. I didn't. I don't think I took you seriously. What you were doing. I let the silence sit for a moment. Outside my window, Seattle was grey and raining, the kind of February that makes everything feel provisional. You do now, I said. He laughed. It was a short sound, surprised out of him. Yeah, he said. I do now. I called my mother that evening. She'd known about the company for years, of course. She was the person I'd called the night we closed our seed round, standing in a parking garage in Portland, because I'd needed to go somewhere quiet to absorb it. She had listened to the whole thing without interrupting and then said simply, Good, keep going. That was my mother. Your uncle called me this afternoon, she said when she picked up. What did he say? He said you'd built something remarkable. He used the word remarkable, which is not a word he uses. She paused. He also asked why you never told him. I told him you had your reasons. I did, I said. I know you did. Another pause. Are you okay? The question caught me off guard in the way that small, direct questions sometimes do. Yeah, I said. I think I am. It doesn't feel the way I thought it would. How does it feel? I looked out the window at the rain. Quiet, I said. Like something that was loud for a long time finally stopped. She said, That's usually what it feels like when it's real. The contract expanded. Hartley Financial became one of our anchor enterprise clients. Stuart, who turned out to be excellent, referred us to 2 other regional consulting groups. We had a strong year. Vivian and I started preliminary conversations about a Series C. My uncle and I talked more that year than we had in the previous 10 combined. Not warmly, exactly. That's not quite the right word for what we were to each other. But honestly, he asked real questions. He listened when I answered. At Christmas, he called to talk about what we were building, and for the first time, he asked about the actual work, not just the optics of the work. He still had opinions about everything. He still said things that made me look at the ceiling for a moment before responding. But there was something different in the room now, a space where before there had been a wall. One evening in December, he told me something he'd apparently told my mother years earlier, but never said to me directly. He said that when I was a teenager, he'd sometimes worried I was too like her, too self-contained, too unwilling to ask for help. He'd thought it was a flaw. Now he was reconsidering. It wasn't a flaw, I said. No, he said. I can see that now. Trevor called me in January. He'd been thinking about leaving his finance job in Chicago to start something of his own, and he wanted to talk through it. We ended up on the phone for 2 hours. He had a good idea, genuinely good, not polished good, and he was scared of it in the way you're scared of things that actually matter. I told him what Vivian had told me a long time ago when I was scared. The fear doesn't mean it's wrong. Sometimes it means it's right. Melissa texted me after, I heard you talk to Trevor. He seems different. Good different. And then, a few minutes later, you're doing the thing where you quietly make everything better without letting anyone make a fuss about it. And then, I just wanted you to know I see it. I screenshot the message and kept it. I'm not sure why. Maybe because being seen, really seen, by someone who knows you, is its own kind of accounting. The kind that doesn't show up in a balance sheet, but that you feel in the way a room changes when you walk into it. The summer before my 33rd birthday, I flew to Phoenix for a family barbecue at my aunt and uncle's house. The same pool, the same yard, the same long table that always needed extra folding chairs because someone inevitably brought a guest. My uncle made a toast. He raised his glass and looked around the table, and this time he stopped when he got to me. To the people in his family who figured out what they were made of, he said, and who were patient enough to let the rest of us catch up. Melissa caught my eye across the table. She raised her glass a fraction of an inch. I raised mine back. It wasn't a grand vindication. It wasn't a dramatic reversal. It was just a man at a table finally meaning what he said. Sometimes that's all it needs to be. That night, after everyone else had gone inside, I sat on the edge of the pool with my feet in the water. The air was still warm, the way Phoenix nights are in summer, the kind of heat that feels earned after the work of the day. I thought about my mother, driving home in the dark right now, probably listening to the radio with the windows down. I thought about Vivian, who was probably still at her desk in Seattle, reading something she claimed she was just glancing at. I thought about the 17-year-old version of me who sat at tables like this one and swallowed things that needed swallowing and told herself, quietly, not yet. Not yet. She had been right. The timing had been hers to set. The terms had been hers to write. I put my feet deeper in the water. I looked up at the sky, which was doing that thing the Arizona sky does in summer. Big and dark and full of stars that you forget are there until someone turns off all the lights. I had built something real. It would outlast this moment and the next one, and whatever came after. And the sweetest part of it, the part I hadn't expected, was that I no longer needed anyone else to understand that for it to be true. I already knew. I used to think patience was something you practiced until it stopped feeling like sacrifice. Now I think it's something else entirely. It's the decision to let your work speak in its own time, on its own terms, without flinching when the room doesn't notice you yet. My uncle spent years talking about money in rooms where I was sitting. He explained the market to me at dinner tables. He offered introductions I didn't need to people who wouldn't have helped me anyway. He did all of it with total sincerity, because he had genuinely never considered that I might already know things he didn't. That's not cruelty. That's a particular kind of blindness that comes from never being challenged by the people you've already decided don't count. What I'd come to understand is that the blindness wasn't really about me. It was about the limits of his imagination. He could only see value in the forms he recognized, the firm handshake, the corner office, the name on a building. I was building something he didn't have a category for yet, and because he had no category for it, I simply didn't register. The thing about that kind of invisibility is that it can break you if you let it. I watched it break my mother in small ways she never acknowledged. The job she left because the room kept talking over her, the ideas she stopped sharing because no one seemed to write them down. She found other ways to be strong. She built a different kind of life. But I always wondered what she might have done if someone had looked at her the way the world eventually looked at me. Not with charity or surprise, but with the plain recognition that she had been right about herself all along. I built the company for a lot of reasons. I built it because I saw a real problem and I had a real solution. I built it because Vivian believed in the work when it was still just a spreadsheet and a pitch deck I'd revised 40 times. I built it because my mother had shown me, without ever saying it directly, that consistency in the dark is worth more than any performance in the light. But I'd be lying if I said some part of it wasn't also for this. For the moment when the facts became impossible to look past. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a scene. Just a Thursday afternoon video call, my name on the screen, and my uncle's face doing the quiet work of understanding something he should have understood a long time ago. What I've learned, and what I think Melissa understood before I did, is that the people who dismiss you are not your audience. They never were. You don't build for them. You build for the work itself, for the people the work actually helps, for the version of yourself you're still becoming. And somewhere along the way, if you build something real enough and true enough, the people who once looked through you will eventually have to look at you. That's not revenge. It's just the natural consequence of doing the work with enough integrity that the world eventually has to account for it. Kate didn't shout. She didn't explain herself prematurely. She waited until the thing she was building was strong enough to speak for itself. That's the discipline. That's the intelligence. And that's the character. The willingness to keep going when no one is watching, because you've decided that what you're making matters more than who is paying attention to you making it. The needle always points somewhere. You just have to be honest enough with yourself to follow it.